Hi, everyone, and welcome back. My name is Savannah. I am your host of Casting Seeds. I have Erika Schmidt here. We are going to be interviewing her as one of my clients. She has an amazing healing and holistic story. I am obviously a part of that story, which is why she's being recorded on the podcast. But it's just a really inspiring story altogether. And she also has amazing diction. She has an amazing past and amazing goals for her future. And I just think that she would be an awesome add to this podcast. It's also really cool too, because she's one of the few non-Christians this season that I'm going to be interviewing. And it just shows that it doesn't matter who you are holistically. If you really live a holistic lifestyle, you really can mesh with everybody all around the world, because you're called to love on everyone equally, especially as Christians. So this is Erika, and I'm going to let her to share a little bit about herself and who she is and where she's headed right now in the future, because that's also a fun little transition she's going through. Welcome, Erika.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks so much for introducing me, Savannah. But yes, my name is Erika, and I have over 10 years experience in the marketing and business field, working from everything from small and medium businesses and startups, all the way to even doing speaking engagements along the way, teaching, doing conferences, and ultimately working at enterprise level companies, taking them from also a medium-sized business to launching them in the public stock market, most recently being Asana. But as Savannah just mentioned, I have recently actually left Asana, and I'm just taking a year to kind of rediscover myself, explore the world, just take time for new hobbies and explore, and just a time for recharge and see what happens from there.
Which is so exciting.
Yeah, I've been planning for this for over 10 years, so I'm super excited for this next chapter in my life that ultimately kind of ends in a question mark. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, and that's part of the excitement.
Especially because she also just bought a van, too.
Camper van.
Yeah, a camper van.
Sorry. We're not talking a minivan, which are also great. I just moved everything, because I sold everything and moved the remaining boxes in the minivan from San Francisco to Portland, and that was pretty great.
Yeah.
Very comfy. I was like, okay, minivans are pretty great.
You did, yeah. You bragged about the minivan.
I was Chrysler Pacifica. I recommend. I'm a marketing people, you forget.
Which I wanted to touch back, because when you were first getting hired at Asana, is when your accident happened.
Yes.
And which is funny that the beginning of your like holistic journey like really started, or I should say had a huge jump start because of your accident, which I've never really put together until right now talking to you. Mm-hmm. And then now continuing out of that physical part of that journey into more of the mental, emotional side, and where you're going to be going in the future is now ending with Asana. Mm-hmm. And Asana was like your number one goal and your favorite company to ever work at. So it's cool seeing that transition, how it happened with you physically and mentally with Asana, and seeing how it's transitioning now to you doing into something new, completely new with your whole life. Yep. So that's super, super cool.
Yeah.
But are you comfortable with talking about the accident and what happened? And because that was a lot.
Yeah. I mean, for the first year or two, for sure, I would really tremble telling people. This time, like, I might get a little palm sweaty, but like I've definitely kind of learned to reflect on that and deal with that. It is just like such a big part of my life and like the journey I've been on since, especially as it relates to health, which brings us here today.
Yeah. How long ago was your accident?
So that would have been right when I started at Asana. I moved to San Francisco, which would have been about 5.5 years ago. I literally was signing my offer letter to start at the company while in a hospital bed 2 days after the accident, after I was waking up from the medication.
That's crazy. You were in deliberations, right, at that time?
Yeah, so what had happened was essentially I was living in San Diego at a time, working at a company that was also a blessing at the start too. It allowed me to speak at conferences, really became like a player in the field. But like my dream job was to also ultimately work in my dream company, dream team, move to San Francisco. So check all the, the boxes, the life boxes. And I had gotten an offer to work at Asana. So I go up to Portland, my hometown, for my brother's wedding. We go, it was great. It was a weekend camping up in Mount Hood. And then like a day or two after the wedding, me, my brother, and his new wife decide to go down to the river to do some cliff jumping. Totally normal in the Northwest. You just, go on a cliff, you jump into the water.
Let's preference that there's water normally at the bottom of cliff jumping.
There's water always at the bottom of cliff jumping. Yes.
This isn't base jumping.
Yeah, not base jumping, no wingsuits or anything like that. So what had happened is like we were going out to the river that day and I had just making one critique to my offer letter saying like, okay, I just want to do this one thing here. And so we go out to the river. There's absolutely no cell signal when you're there. And then we're cliff jumping and we go to this cliff that's the highest I've ever jumped before. And I'm normally like mentally, I'm not scared of heights. But my body, I've noticed over the last few years, would just get shaky as it gets near heights. I'm just like, well, this isn't fair. Like, I'm not scared of you. Like, I'm still going to jump. Like, I'm going to do this thing and overcome my fear. Mind over matter, right? Supposedly. That's what they say.
Do you know how many feet it was roughly?
Ooh, it was probably about 30 feet. And the thing about this cliff is it's not a cliff where it's kind of like a diving board where you just take a step and you're in water. Mm-hmm. It's a cliff where you need to do a running jump because it juts out. So you need to get good momentum going.
That's terrifying. Like cringing while you're explaining it.
Yeah. So I finally go to do this jump and I was kind of already shaken up there. But once again, I was like, mind over matter. I can do this. Ignore everything my body is telling me. And this is pretty important also for me saying that. Like I ignored what my body was telling me. And when I went to finally go to jump, my body was like, hold up. Nope, I'm not doing this. And it stuttered. But I had already had enough momentum at that point that instead of stopping at the cliff, I ended up toppling over the cliff and I did not have that good jump needed. And so I ended up hitting the cliff on the way down. My sister-in-law who saw it, she said I ended up hitting it twice. What I knew when I went over that cliff, I remember thinking and seeing the water and the cliff going like, this is not going to end well. Those were my thoughts. And like, those are the only things I remember thinking. And if I had any chance of survival, it's like protect my head and chest. That was what I need to do. Cause you've heard like going up in the Northwest where cliff jumping is so common, you've heard of the horror stories that can happen. Like there are those tales.
Well, just water shock. Like let alone cliff jumping.
Yeah. That's like a whole other like component too. This was like summer. So that was fine. But like, I went over that cliff. And I remember hitting it, and then the next thing I know, I'm in the water, and all I can do when I'm in the water is pretty much use my right arm at that point and my right leg to tread enough to get to the top of water. By the time I get to the top of the water, like I see tons of people rushing for me. My brother had just dove into the water. Everyone's freaking out because, even my sister-in-law, my brother, who talk about the story to this day, they shake from it. They thought I had died on impact. A lot of people did. But, I basically managed, along with their help, to get to the side of the water and immediately, lay me down and, do an spy assessment. And I've broken and sprained tons of bones in my life. Immediately, I just started doing my own self-scan as everyone else was, freaking out, going, if I gonna get through this, I've also just been through such a big accident. I don't know what's happened to my body, but I need to do a self-scan. So I started wiggling my fingers, wiggling my toes. What is working, what's not? Because I was super worried. Because obviously my head, for what I can tell, is fine. But am I paralyzed? I just hit a cliff. I don't know how many times I hit it, but I hit it good once. Immediately I knew my elbow was broken. People thought my left leg was also broken because I couldn't see it, but there was a big, pretty much hematoma, for those of you who don't know, it's basically a massive bruise that swells up. So it was all sorts of colors, and there was already bruises all forming all over my body. So I was laying there, and at one point, I think after maybe 15 minutes, as they were trying to call an ambulance, because once again, we're in an area where you don't get cell service, so someone had to drive away to get cell service, and we're also in a small canyon.
Wow.
So it's a whole scene. And
you you have full recollection of all of this?
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty burned in grain memory.
Well, some people, they go into shock, so they can only remember certain parts of their, especially really significant endangerment moments of their life, where their body literally blocks it out, whether it's physically and or mentally and emotionally. So it's amazing that you remember so much from that day, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I remember everything that I was awake for. But yeah, I think it's just like I just knew that everyone else was freaking out and I needed to maintain calm if I wanted to kind of figure out what's wrong and like survive.
Yeah.
Especially when, they're flagging down an ambulance and we're trying to still assess like how bad am I? Can I get myself out of this small canyon? It's like a steep trail out, but it's really not that big. It's like another 30 feet to get out.
So how did you get out of the water?
Well, they had helped me get off to the shore, and that's where I was doing that body scan. And there was a point where we tried to make me stand, and I was like, oh, like we maybe got myself like a head up, and I was like, nope, I got to go back down, because I could tell immediately my body was then in shock, because I started like getting really nauseous the moment I was starting to stand. So I was like, can't stand, can't move. We got to wait for the ambulance. So once they finally did get here, they were immediately like drugging me up, going like, we got to keep her calm. We can't have her freak out. We can't have her go to shock. They're assessing my own body. And like they also, pretty much say like, yep, we got to get her to the hospital. And so they had to set up this whole system, like a whole rig. And it took them like, I don't know, like an hour just to set up the system to get me out of the canyon.
Really?
Yeah, it was like this whole ropes. I was on a stretcher, all this stuff.
Were you in severe pain while you were waiting, or were they able to administer drugs to be able to help you?
They administered drugs while they were trying to help me. So I'm like shaking a little bit while I talk about that. That's still okay. Like one of the things that I do this today.
We can also take a break.
I can do this.
I know you can do it, but the same way, remember in our body work, how I say that it's good to take a step back and breathe, that it's okay. We can do that too in talking about this.
Savannah's always right.
No, I'm not always right. But
not always.
I'm here to guide you.
She's right a lot of times, which is why I'm here. So.
So are you, which is why you are here. We're back.
We're back.
Erika I'm just going to describe what's happening right now. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, you can describe.
Erika's PTSD legitimately is coming back while talking about it, and her whole right leg is like tremoring while I'm staring at it. And it sometimes did that when I worked on you in the future. But I've never heard this story in depth before. We've talked about it in sections, because also she was healing through things while I was working on her. And also just, it's not fun to go through these stories. But that's why I have you here, and you're super brave for coming on here, because I don't think people think about the mental, physical aspect and how connected the mental, physical, and emotional part are. For a podcast, like even just talking about this on the podcast, which I don't know if you want to take like a break from telling the story and explain the triangle that I explained to you, if that also might help distract a little bit, if you're comfortable with it.
I mean, I can explain the triangle now. I can also just finish the story too, because I feel like, I don't know, finish the story, it like kind of leads into that triangle.
Okay, yeah. You can take us back right to where we were, or you can get to where, like what the diagnosis ended up being.
Yeah, I'll probably skip to there. I mean, point is, we eventually got myself out of the canyon. I remembered pretty much all of it. Got on the ambulance, and there we are at the hospital. And immediately, the diagnosis was essentially like my left elbow was like shattered to the point where like within the next 24 hours, we needed to do surgery and insert a bunch of metal. As some of my friends in the medical field like to say, that the metal that is inside my elbow is like a work of art. I'm part bionic woman. And then I had I was referencing this earlier, a hematoma on my left leg, which is like a huge swelling, but mine was like literally gigantic.
And painful.
Like it took up, like imagine your thigh, right? Imagine half your thigh, imagine having another thigh attached to your thigh. That
it did like, not look like that, but
you didn't see it fresh.
That's true.
You did not. You never saw it fresh.
Dang. Did anyone hear like the tone that just happened?
People at work had a nickname
Jeremiah's
for it.
Laughing in the back. They could see it like through your pants.
Oh, so this was like a month later after I finally went back. Like I said, I was originally in San Diego, and I was just visiting Portland for a wedding, supposedly for 5 days. I ended up having to stay up there for another month to heal at my parents' house.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't be transported yet. And when I finally do get back to San Diego, this is a whole month later, the hematoma was still so big that people at work, San Diego, it's warm, I'm wearing shorts. They were just like, oh my goodness. And one of my friends
Erika.
nicknamed it Herman, which I did not enjoy because having something called Herman attached to you is just like really weird, but somehow also endearing and stuck. Herman the hematoma. But on top of the hematoma, so we got a broken elbow, a hematoma. I also had a slight break on my spine too, my L4, L5 disc. And then I just had bruising all over my body. Like you could just see me covered in bruises.
Yeah.
Even the MRIs showed that even weeks later, I was just like internally bruises everywhere. Miraculously, I was going to make a full recovery, supposedly. And I did, to all our knowledge, until like, yeah, supposedly up until like pretty much like 2 years later, which kind of brings us to our story.
Yeah.
It just kind of unraveled,
Mm-hmm. Which, and that's a big thing that people don't talk about in holistic health is every 6 months to every year, your body remembers what happens to you the same way that Erika, like, and I just want to note too, to anyone listening, that Erika still is having full on tremors. Like it got bigger and then it's kind of relaxed a little bit. I think especially when you get to talk, but, and again, we can take a break if needed, or even like let you walk around if you need, but, your body remembers. And I can relate to this with Erika. I slipped and fell down a tile staircase and it chopped my glute in half, my left glute on Christmas Eve. Yeah. Yeah. And it was awful. And every year since then, has it been 4 years, Jeremiah?
No.
3?
That was when I moved down here.
2020.
So it would have been 3 years ago.
But now isn't it 2020? Oh, this year will be 4 years. I can't believe it's only been 3 years.
Just done math, people.
That's why I'm a holistic health practitioner.
I'll also say that it's like midnight on a Friday night, so her doing the math was good.
Guys,
good.
We're only awake right now. This is going to be a little side note. We are only awake right now because I made homemade ice cream the other night, and we ate, what are they? The chocolate that has a bunch of caffeine in it. Cacao. Yeah. And all of us had some, and it literally jolted up. Like we all got super awake, and then I even sewed some of Erika's pants.
Yeah,
my sewing machine.
There's a whole trail of things that happened tonight that have led us from like, let's do a podcast at like 8 or 9
to midnight madness.
Good morning.
Good morning. What were we talking about?
I don't know. You're the host, guys. Back.
Oh, I remember. I can backtrack. It's good. We got this. Muscle memory and remembering our injuries. So every year around the anniversary of like a injury, or even every 6 months, your body does a revert. And it does, like, it can be in a little way, or it can be like just a full blown trauma, like traumatic, mental, physical. And it is talked about a lot, I feel like, in like doctor realms and in holistic realms, but rarely together. So in doctor realms, that's called allopathic medicine, and we have holistic medicine, right? So one's more Western. Oh my gosh, are you okay? Yeah. You are literally trembling like half the couch.
It's normal.
That's crazy. That's
latent PTSD.
I just want to tell you guys though that this isn't her normal. Like her new normal isn't just like walking around thinking about this and just randomly quivering. Like this is the first time I've seen her personally go through this and telling the story.
Yeah,
but
I've only given you snippets before, but I'm literally I'm going back when I go back to the full story,
which is it was less than 6 years ago. That's really fresh mentally. So to get back to the story in general, so Erika moved back down here during 2020. Jen, it was cool because at that time you could work for Asana and still be in the community that you wanted to be with friends. And then I think I was just finishing school, and I had just finished an alignment program at that time. And that's when I first met you. And well, client wise, that's when I first met you client wise. And, cause we've known each other for quite some time, which we'll get into that later. Yeah. But I would love for you to tell the story of like why you decided to allow me to work on you. What interested you in alignment work, and what made you think it could possibly be beneficial for your injuries? Because now at this point, we're fast forwarding from your injury in 2018 to now 2 years later, where you were obviously having some big reverts. And I know like you can talk about how severe things were. You don't have to talk about, but there were some pretty severe things where even, I mean, after even go-karts, you felt like you had to go to the hospital. So if you want
to the hospital.
Did you go?
Yeah. You got mad at me for going alone.
Oh, that's right. I did. I wanted to go with you. By the way, I don't normally take clients to hospital. I should note now that I've known Erika for 10 years. She did call me while she was in the hospital with this injury. I guess.
I didn't know anyone else down here. So.
Yeah. Well, actually, our 10-year anniversary came up just this past few days.
Yes.
So, and then she also just happened to have a significant injury and just be such a really wonderful, beautiful, well-rounded person. And that's why she's on this podcast. Though I'd love to interview other clients if they'd let me. But Erika, so what, besides obviously you knowing me, because you also knew me pre-holistic health.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the moment where you were like, you know what, I'm going to try alignment therapy. I think this would be healthy for me, especially because you were in a really severe state at that time. So what was that moment for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we had to take a step back because like I had said earlier that while I had all these, broken elbow, hematomas, spine, like things where like I shouldn't be walking away with a clean slate, supposedly I was. And I'd done all the work and I was back to full health, just getting my fitness like back up in order over the next like few years. And then it was at the start of 2020, like in March 2020, when literally everything was shutting down. And I was in San Francisco, which was the first city to shut down in the US. And I had gone to the gym, and like the next day after like weight training, I was like, I can't move. Like literally I am in pain. Like I can't move. Like it is so, I'm hobbling to the bathroom at best. And literally for like that week, like it got to a point where I remember like things are officially closed. Like all you can really do is be home. If not, take a walk around the block. I could barely walk in my house. I remember me just walking a half a block to the park that I used to go to every morning. I had to sit down on a planter ledge and cry because I was just in such terrible pain, like just shooting pain all the way down to my left foot, which then we confirmed later was sciatica and specifically related to the spinal break that I had, the L4, the L5. So what had happened is that like in the years following my recovery from like, even though my breaks had all healed and everything like that, my body had been compensating in certain ways, muscle wise, like, okay, this leg is weaker, obviously my left side, because that's where the bulk of my injury was. So the right side has to, do a little bit more, but then the left side's not as strong. So I'd had this consistent off balancing to the point where it's kind of like, the final straw that was finally the tipping point. And it just happened to be right at the start of COVID. So perfect timing. And that had started at the hospital was just like a whole regimen of like working with people who were PT for like, I kid you not, I was doing this well up until I met Savannah, even like over a year when like we should have seen results. Like they even said that we should have seen results, like going on certain types of drugs for the pain, and nothing was working. And this was just like this chronic pain where like literally standing is painful, walking, which is, Savannah knows this, I take 15,000 steps a day. It's my favorite hobby. Like to take walking away from me, especially during a pandemic when like that's all you have, it was just such debilitating, both mentally and emotionally, to not just do the simplest physical movements of standing and walking. So I often like was crying, just not even walking a half back, being in the house and just like crying. And so there were points where about 6 months into the pandemic that I could actually like get myself around. It was still hard, but it wasn't ideal. That I came down to Orange County for a visit, and I was like, I'm ready to change things up. I can move around, and I moved down to Orange County. And that's where, Savannah and I were really reconnecting, and she had, as she said, just graduated from her program, and she was telling me all about it. And I was like, Well, this PT stuff, the hospital stuff, the drugs, it's all not working. Like you do stuff that has to do with the body, fascia realignment. It's like, well, let's give this a shot. The doctors aren't working.
Mhm.
So I ended up still doing a lot what the doctors are doing, but also Savannah stuff. And I saw improvements with what Savannah was doing. And we experimented a lot. Like my condition is
Yeah.
much more severe than most.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoy like the educational component along the way of like why we think I was healing certain ways, why things weren't healing, versus like with the doctors is just like a blanket statement. Like, oh yeah, MRI confirms you have sciatica. This is what you get. Here's a blanket treatment. Blanket treatment ain't working. So eventually it was to a point where, I started seeing what worked with Savannah, but I also picked up this book from a spinal doctor who literally helped Olympic weight training athletes who were told that they would never lift again because they also got some form of sciatica, actually lift again, even compete back in the Olympics. Because there's forums of people online who had sciatica going like, this can't be it. Like I am my 20s. Like I really was in my 20s going like, I'm supposed to be like this for the rest of my life and have it progressively get worse. I mean, the next step would have been spinal surgery, which there's no confirmation that could actually really work. And that's a whole other year of recovery.
Yeah. Which we'll list also the book in the bio.
Yeah, I still have that book. I don't have many physical books, but that's one physical book I actually do have and I will keep.
Yeah. I specialize in more of a release therapy. I like to say that Pilates is a mixture of lengthening and strengthening, where alignment work and rolfing, that kind of structural integration, is more of the lengthening process and getting your body to understand how to release purposefully. So Erika was a perfect example of a body in a chronic state of protection, which is beautiful because our bodies are supposed to protect ourselves. That's how we were beautifully designed, for our bodies to stay safe. And pain is a good thing and a beautiful thing. And it's a neuro response trigger saying that there's something wrong. So my job is to help people understand what their pain is saying and how not just to communicate with it, right? Like when we hear pain or when we see that our body's seizing in a certain way, normally then it causes a certain level of anxiety and stress. And I feel like my job is to help someone. It'd be kind of like if we were sitting here, Erika, and I was speaking Chinese, you'd be like, okay, I can hear you. I can hear you speaking Chinese, but I don't understand what you're saying. And I feel like that's where I come in, where I teach people how to understand what the language is. So your body language and pain, I'm allowing you to feel like, oh, like, is this, what type of pain is this? Is it a sharp pain? Oh, this is what that means in this area. Is it an organ versus a muscle? And it was really cool watching Erika go through those realizations through each session as to what's connected to what. Like when we started in her feet, when we worked our way up to her legs and her hips, and when we were breaking down your hematoma, when we started getting into your chest and around your neck and the stress that came out of that, and a lot with your TMJ and stuff like that as well. Every single layer that we've gone through, and none of it is, I would say, like, I feel like your TMJ still comes back every once in a while, right?
Mm-hmm. Still there.
Yeah. Yeah. So like there's some things that obviously we haven't been able to fully do and fix, but also you don't live around here anymore. And I did recommend somebody else that you have been seeing in San Francisco while you were living up there, which is great. And I love that you saw him. But ultimately, when it comes to structural work, like alone, because obviously I don't just recommend people only do structural work. As you know, when we work together, I recommend you take certain types of herbs and supplements to help manage the stress levels and to help you be able to grow and relax and decompress, especially even before or after sessions, because you are one of my more severe cases. And then also on top of that, doing certain structural movements and exercises, whether it be Pilates or strength training, or like that book that you got. When it came to the structural work alone or our sessions in itself, is there anything that stood out to you? Oh, like the triangle that we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the triangle, I can kind of go speak to that, is this is something that ultimately, like, I had spoken to before I even moved down to Orange County, but Savannah was like, oh, wait, this is a triangle. And if you make a triangle with your hands, you obviously have or you have the two sides that are diagonals, one being your mental, so what are your thoughts in your brain, and then the other being your emotional, so what's your heart, and your base being your physical, so the foundation right there. And the thing is, if one wall comes collapsing down, so maybe it's your emotions or mental onto essentially your foundation, you can still strand, you can still operate. But if both come collapsing down, so you're ignoring the thoughts in your head, you're ignoring the emotions swirling around your body, then eventually that collapses down to your physical foundation and you'll physically react in some way. I'm also someone who's had like chronic stress throughout my life because I've really pushed myself with work and schooling. That's a whole other story. But like that's turned into even times where like I will literally have eye twitches for like an entire month, like I did this past summer, or like literally have panic attacks waking in the middle of the night. Super, super serious stress. That's how I always know I'm at the final straw. It's like when literally your body's reacting. Yeah. And even kind of going back to that fall, like I was talking about, my body, like even though mentally I was like, yes, I can do this. Emotionally, I want to jump. My physical, like I was ignoring actually what I truly wanted, which was like I was ignoring that my body like did not want to go. So everything kind of came crashing down and my body was just like, okay, physically we're going to stutter and you're going to fall. So that's where it's like everything ultimately is kind of like this balance of like, you have to really listen and understand. You can't ignore everything. Otherwise there will be that kind of like physical pullback or repercussions in some way that will come through. And mine nearly cost me my life. Like I'm super lucky that I'm here today, that I don't have any permanent injuries.
Yeah. I mean, I can attest to that. I would be devastated if anything had permanently happened to you in any way.
You were quite mad, I think, when I finally told you.
I was livid. This is a little side tangent. I got a voicemail from Erika, just saying, hey, I want to let you know I'm in the hospital and I think I'm going to go into surgery soon. I fell off a cliff. Okay, bye.
See, that I don't remember. I was too drugged up.
I wish I had it saved, but it was an old phone. It was the best and worst voicemail ever. I didn't have any of her family's numbers. I couldn't contact her. It was terrifying, and I didn't hear back from her for like 5 days. It was the worst thing.
I was a great friend
of my life, and I didn't have her. I wanted to send flowers. I started calling hospitals up there, and then I found out the one that you were at, and then I was able to get her family's information through that because I was a psycho. But anyway,
I didn't know that. I was just chilling in the hospital on drugs.
Yeah, I know you were. So Erika, one of the last questions I wanted to talk to you about was body awareness in general, because I feel like a lot of people get confused when I talk about body awareness and what it means and the definition of it, because it can change for people. For me in general, I think body awareness, when I teach it, is about individual discernment for each person and their body and understanding that language. I would love for you to be able to put in your own words how body awareness affected you, what your version of body awareness is, and overall, if it did change your perspective towards holistic health and healing or your lifestyle in any way, and or if it impacted you negatively in any way. Sometimes an over awareness of body awareness can be overstimulating for a lot of people and actually kind of scary, that accountability that happens all at once. And taking people through baby steps is a part of my job and what I like to do on people's health teams. But it doesn't always work out the best for everybody. So I would love to hear your recollection of that, because I worked on you for at least, we started with a 10-session series, a regular base series, but we realized that you needed a lot more, and it ended up being over a year's worth of work. And sometimes it would be, I don't think we ever did twice a week, but
not twice a week. We used to do like once a month, and then I was like, I think we need to do twice a month.
Yeah, we stuck to it pretty regularly. And then I think there was only 1 month where I saw you maybe 3 times because I'd be able to see you in between, and I think that was when you had more of like a revert injury when it came back around that time of year. But again, we were able to catch it right away and also use supplements and things to help And also we were working with your doctors at the same time, which was great and beautiful. And your doctors were very knowledgeable and did such a great job at doing all of the scans and everything needed and getting everything confirmed right away, which was great. But yeah, I'd love to hear your opinion on body awareness and how it affected you overall.
Yeah, I think body awareness to me is ultimately, it's like listening to your body, like very deeply. And it's not just like listening to where like you have pain or aches or anything else. Like I was talking about earlier, like there's this triangle that you have. There's an emotional, there's a mental, and there's of course like a physical component. I think a lot of times when it comes to our health, we're so focused on that physical component because that's what we're taught to be. Like feel pain, address the pain. But in like my sessions with Savannah, one of the things that really stopped out and she really had to coach me through is like, your body, your muscles, they have a memory. And I went through something very traumatic in that fall that came with a lot of emotion. I mean, obviously I was like shaking, explaining it earlier. And so with that, I was like, oh geez, there is a lot of like emotional here and thoughts still running around that, I thought I had dealt with, but they're kind of like buried. Like I even saw a therapist after that to kind of deal with the PTSD at the time.
Yeah.
But like muscles have a memory. So of course the fact that I'm in pain and I feel, and we're triggering it too, trying to rework it, is going to release that. So essentially became this plan of like me doing this work in a book. Like I said, this book on the side that was really helpful for understanding what type of sciatica I had, not just a blanket MRI scan, and doing a lot of just like kind of daily stretches and muscle building, but like Savannah also releasing certain muscles and then even just asking me certain questions while she was working on me, making me think certain things, having like a rose tea that I literally drink every day for like 2 months. It's meant to release you emotionally and just like feel those emotions. Because if you hold on to an emotion, if you hold on to a thought and those thoughts or emotions are tied to your physical, your muscles, you're truly not going to be able to heal physically. And I know it sounds a little woo-woo and everything, but it's true.
It does.
Like I remember being on that table, and it took a number of sessions to get here, but like Savannah said, we worked from my feet all the way up to my top, and we started getting to the top, like especially when we're working on the spot where I actually had the fall, and even upwards to like my neck and head. It's just like I'd get these flashbacks either from the accident, or sometimes I'd feel certain emotions that were very much tied to that accident, or like me healing back at home, which like my home life back then was just not the greatest. And that's another story. But anyways, it's really about listening, but listening to yourself in full, like that emotional, that mental, that physical journey. Because when you listen to every single component and you really do things that can serve each one of those and ultimately heal each one of those, that's when you'll start to see that real magic happen, where everything kind of unravels and does loosen, and becomes much more like aligned. So that's how I would describe what did you say again?
Body awareness.
body awareness. That's how I would describe body awareness, and it still serves me to this day. Like I definitely am still very much mindful of like what's going on in my head. How am I feeling emotionally? I still drink rose tea to this day, especially when I'm feeling tense. Making sure that I am serving and feeding my body in every single possible way that I can, because it all ultimately is all tied together. We don't just have these categories of our body. It all is one, and you need to understand that.
Yeah. And just for the listeners who are wondering about rose tea, rose helps calm down the pericardium of your heart. So whenever I have clients who have panic attacks, which when I was working on Erika, the areas that we were in were actually re-stirring panic attacks on the table while I was working on her. And we would have to sometimes even take a break in the middle of me working on her and we'd both cry sometimes. Or I would give her tinctures to help calm down, or we would have to actually end early some days and realize that it's okay that your body was kind of, I call them KOs, like your body was saying I'm done, and we were listening to your body, and we'd pick back up next week or the week after, or when it was clear that her body was ready for that. And that does take a certain awareness, obviously, from the practitioner, but also having that emotional and mental connection where you feel safe enough with your practitioner that you can say, I need to stop now. And I will compliment Erika in the fact that she did such a beautiful job at not just communicating to me during our sessions, but also, you know, like when she was doing her workouts and working on her book, or even asking me for certain strength training positions or what could help counterbalance, because I also showed her how to do personal cupping on herself and pelvic floor work, those types of things. When Erika did those things, she did it consistently, and she did it because she knew that if she did the preventative work now, that would help her not just have long-term mobility, but longevity for her muscles and strength training. And I always love to tell people that even if you don't feel like you're in pain now, preventative work is the most important thing that you could do for your body, mobility wise, healthcare wise, longevity wise, for literally everything. If people started wrapping their minds around healthcare as preventative instead of just trying to fix what's already broken, imagine how different our world would be.
Yes.
Healthcare wise.
Yeah. And that's why I still do it to this day. Like, preventative is super important because I want to be able to really enjoy my life and body, mind, emotions, all that stuff now, and also going forward, because I really want to increase, like, I've been going down more medical books and everything, your health span, you know, essentially, like we talk about lifespan, like, yeah, you want to live to your 80, your 90, you want to have your grandkids and everything else, which is beautiful. But like, if you're 80 or 90 and your mind is shot, or you're in a wheelchair, and like, that's scary stuff that happens when you get older. But then, you know, if you do the preventative work, if you do things like this, or if you drink rose tea, have the right diet, that increases your health span. So you can still be very able-bodied, moving all around, be fully present in your mind, even well into those like latent years of your life.
Yeah, no, that's great. And honestly, what you were saying reminded me of everything that they said in that documentary on Netflix in Blue Zones.
Jinx. She owes me something. You heard it all.
It's just funny. Well, because they had, I mean, all of the people in Blue Zones, they all had a certain amount of mobility and movement, and that's what kept them sharp continuously. Yeah. That's literally the number one consistent thing, besides, I think they said a little bit more of a plant-based diet created longevity.
And community.
Yeah, and community.
I want to rewatch
those
it
again.
Again.
Those were like the main ones, though. But the number one that they mentioned every time was mobility.
And it was movement. Just like daily movement. It wasn't like go do CrossFit. It was like
gardening.
Kind of garden. Take walks, people.
Yeah, walks.
I like walks.
And like squatting a lot and bending over. But those are real movements that we do every day. And that's why on the table in Rolfing / I do structural integration. In that like work on the table, we do real movements that you would do in everyday life to allow the subconscious part of your brain to relax and say, oh yeah, I have to let go and chill in order to complete this movement and not allow the fascia tissue to hold everything tight. So I am super thankful that Erika came on to our podcast today on Casting Seeds. And I forgot to explain to you, Erika, so my podcast name, Casting Seeds, is a play on words and a parable, that like two different parables that Jesus spoke. But one, casting pearls, is like basically saying like you're taking nuggets and you're throwing it out. Like it's a no-go. We don't agree. We don't like this. And then planting seeds means that things are going to grow and root, and like something beautiful came out of this. And I always say at the end of each podcast that people get to comment and share, obviously, whether or not they think that this episode was truly casting pearls, like, nah, this was a waste of time. Or if it really planted seeds. And if it did, I want to hear why they think it was casting pearls or why they thought it was planting seeds. And that's why the podcast is called Casting Seeds. Because it's a
very informative.
Yeah, and Jeremiah thought of it, which is just so, my husband is so amazing.
Well, I hope this was seeds.
I think it was.
I'll be very sad if it's pearls, people. Just saying, I'll take it personally. Not really. Hopefully
it's only your life story, but it's fine.
Yeah.
No judgment. But I doubt it would be pearly in any way. But I am really thankful and blessed that, one, I've known you for so long, but two, that you ended up being able to have a positive healthcare journey out of something so horrific and terrible. And I am so honored that you chose me to be one of your healthcare providers and help guide you along, because I'm going to throw this out there, you guys. Most practitioners are recommended to never work on family or friends, and especially spouses. And those are the people I work on the most, honestly. And I love it. I love that intimacy, but it's because one, the practitioner can become impatient and kind of like, come on, let's get through this, and kind of angry, you know? But then also family can treat you differently and not listen or not take you seriously. And Erika came with a lot of humility and grace and was just ready to consistently learn. And that's one of the things I really love and admire about you. And one of the things I want to continuously be when I think of you. I want to be like you in that way.
She's so sweet. There's also a lot of laughs.
Yeah, we
a
laugh
lot
a
of
lot.
laughs.
Which there could just be a whole episode of people just listening to us laugh and out. Actually, we didn't have a lot of outtakes, but there was like a whole 30 minutes of us just laughing, pretty much.
Right before the start of the show?
Yeah.
Yeah, that took a while.
Yeah, you took a while.
Also fact.
Is there anything, Erika, that you'd like to say to the audience before we go? Any last final notes or anything that you would like to summarize in holistic health in general, or something that's really spoken to you? I know it's a new year, but within the past year, that was a huge like well of encouragement for you that really set you on the ground running for, I know, your new life that's happening and new changes and just your new body that's continued to grow, because you've healed a lot since when we first started in 2020. And even before that, you've done a lot of hard work, and anything would be inspiring for me.
I know, I feel so extra loosey-goosey after you worked on me the other day. I was like, ooh, I can roll my neck all sorts of ways. What I think I said, I feel like an owl. Like, look at that movement. It's impressive. Anyways, but yeah, I mean, I still have Savannah work on me, even though it's been well past, like, we've dealt with a large part of my sciatica. And like I said, it has to do with a lot of preventative, a lot of check-ins, making sure that you're still good to go. I think if you're someone who, you know, you don't have to have a cliff jumping accident or a broken spine to get to where I am, to see someone like Savannah or to explore holistic health. You could just be someone in your daily, like we all do things where we move a box and, you know, you pinch a nerve. You could be just going to the gym and you push yourself too hard. But I think a lot of times we mistake just like the daily wear and tear and aches in our body to something like, oh, this is just age and I have to deal. That's false. There is something that you can do about it. And honestly, like, it just set up a whole journey with me personally of exploring holistic health and doing a lot of biohacking over the years that goes well beyond what Savannah has done, to understand my body a lot more at a mental state, a nutritional state, emotionally, everything, to see what can we do to once again increase that kind of like health span, to have a longer lifespan in parallel with each other. And so I would recommend, just, you can do your own research on your side. Savannah's loaded with information. You can go see her to kind of understand like what is going on with your body. And I will say it does take consistent work, no matter what path you choose, whether it's drinking rose tea or another type of tea or like some kind of vitamin or pill, like be consistent about it. Do it for the period that they recommend. And if you see results, great. Continue to do that. Continue to explore. If you don't, try something else. There's things that I've tried where it didn't necessarily work, but I wasn't going to just end holistic health just because that one thing didn't work. It just didn't work for me. And there could have been like a reason that might not work for me, that for a reason I didn't know, or maybe I just wasn't having the right quality, or the person didn't understand my body as well. I think, when you go to the hospital these days, a lot of time it is just kind of like a blanket, like, here's some pills, here's this, here's that should cure you. And that's not always the case for all of us. It's very much a blanket statement, but like really understanding your body, that body awareness, that listening can help you really understand like what should you be doing to ultimately get better with your life so you can have a long, happy life.
Thank you, Erika. And always remember to, I'll put I can't talk now. It's almost 1 a.m. So I'm going to put Erika's Instagram information if any of you guys have any questions about things that she's done, or you want to follow her on her new van life journey and traveling around the world as well, with her reset that's happening and new job things that are happening. We hope you enjoyed learning how to cultivate God's creation from a biblical perspective. Holistic health is to prioritize whole person wellness through Christ. Like and comment on what topics we're casting seeds or casting pearls.
If you found this information provided useful, subscribe to our podcast for future updates, leave a review to help us improve, and share this episode. We would like to remind you before we leave that perfect health cannot be attained in this world.
Only spiritual salvation through sanctification and repentance to God and turning away from sin will give you a perfect body in the kingdom come. Nourish yourself in the Word, in prayer, and in biblical fellowship daily.
Thank you for joining us today, and a special thank you to our listeners for making this podcast possible.
Always praying.
Keep casting seeds.